We have good rebars and everything. Hey everybody, Dana Shoaf, editor of Civil War Times Magazine. I'm back from the Gettysburg Battlefield with Dr. Jennifer Murray. We're talking about Meade on July 2, 160 years ago. We are under the shade of a marvelous tulip tree here on Cemetery Ridge. And if you look that way, you can see the Pennsylvania Monument, the largest monument on the battlefield, which you can now go up in again and use as an observation platform. In front of that is a very famous First Minnesota Monument, who is going to pay a price on this day as well for Daniel Sickles, I guess we could say. You turn around and you can see to my left the New York State Monument, and then in the distance you'll see Big Round Top again. Keep spinning around to the right, and you're out. You can see the Trossel Barn, the white and the brick. That is where Sickles watched the battle, and of course he's going to get struck by an artillery shell that more or less, I think it grazes his horse and his leg, both. It crushes his leg, and is going to put him out of action for the rest of the fight. So what we're going to talk about here, what Jennifer's going to talk about, is Meade's response to this debacle that's unfolding in front of him. And as she mentioned when we were up at the 73rd New York Monument, it's really amazing because every corps, as she said, except the 11th, gets in this fight. 12th Corps guys get pulled off. Culp's Hill, they may not engage here, but they're pulled off. You've got the 5th Corps going in. There's a 6th Corps brigade that goes in. The 2nd Corps comes in. Sickles is grabbing 5th Corps artillery batteries and putting them in terrible positions. Sickles staff officers, they're getting overrun, etc. But Meade's pretty active, I think, as a commander, comes down here and tries as best he can to take charge of the situation and staunch the flow of blood, if you will, that his army is suffering here. So, Jennifer, why don't you take it from here?
Thanks, Dana. So I'll start with a pretty simple premise of what I think Meade's leadership on July the 2nd amounts to. So I'm writing a biography on Meade from life to death, and I think that July the 2nd is Meade's finest day as commanding general of the Army of the Potomac. I don't think there's a day in the American Civil War as commanding general of the Army of the Potomac that he performs as well and as actively as he does here at Gettysburg. He is everywhere. We left him last stop out at the Peach Orchard, and I mentioned, I think, as we were wrapping up, that meeting, Meade will then ride back basically to where we're at along the Taneytown Road, Wheatfield Road intersection, and start to watch the 5th Corps deploy into those fields to reinforce Sickles. Now remember, Meade was commanding the 5th Corps just a few days prior to this.
Right.
So when he's watching the 5th Corps take this position in places like Little Round Top, down on Plum Run, those are guys that he was just Corps commander a week earlier. But Meade is active. I've looked to sort of plot his trajectory on July the 2nd, and he's visible at so many places on this battlefield. And I just want to emphasize again something that you mentioned, Dana, about the Sickles apologists, if we will. The cost of Sickles' forward movement is...
You know who you are.
Right. Identify yourself. is tremendous for this army. Mm-hmm. With the 5th Corps, the 2nd Corps, mm-hmm. the 12th Corps, and we'll maybe talk about the 12th Corps specifically, and the 1st Corps, and the 6th Corps, all having to move to reinforce Sickles' forward movement. You can count all the divisions that reinforce Sickles' line, and you'll end up with 9. There are 9 divisions plucked from different parts of this Union Army battle line to reinforce Dan Sickles. The 12th Corps, over on Culp's Hill, for instance, and sort of the right end of the Union Army's line, is in a pretty precarious position when 12th Corps soldiers are being plucked off of Culp's Hill, a place you study a lot and do a lot of tours over in Culp's Hill, leaving just Brigadier General George Sears Green and 1,400 New Yorkers to hold that line. Now, there's debate in the primary record of whether or not Meade wanted the entire 12th Corps to be plucked off of Culp's Hill or just parts of it.
Parts of it, right.
And Slocum says something different than what General Williams says and then what some of the soldiers say. And Meade never writes specifically. So it seems unlikely to me that Meade, for all the attention he gave on the morning of July the 2nd to his right, with its proximity to the Baltimore Pike, that he would have been so short-sighted to pluck the entire corps. But those guys are going to start to filter in sort of the area that we're at now by the New York Auxiliary Monument, maybe around 6:30, 7 o'clock in the evening.
Yeah,
those are Lockwood's brigade.
Lockwood's, and I think they go in. They go in.
They do. And there are some soldiers in the Maryland Potomac Home Brigade that will write that they saw Meade leading Lockwood's brigade onto the field. Now, is that plausible, right? Can we imagine an Army general, commanding general of the Army of the Potomac, leading a brigade onto the field? That's what they're saying. That's evidence of how active he is. He's certainly down in this area. Your viewers are looking up towards the Pennsylvania Monument through most of that afternoon, really until he goes back to the Leicester House around 7:30, probably. He's standing, or he's mounted rather, watching the First Corps come in. Those are John Newton's men who will be also responsible for reinforcing Sickles' line. And it's in that area, somewhere near maybe the Pennsylvania Memorial, where, and I brought his photograph along, that, talk about Old Baldy a second?
Sure. Meade's horse. So
viewers, this is the coolest, most veteran of all the Civil War general's horses. Old Baldy. Meade will acquire him in September of 1861. This was formerly David Hunter's horse. And he's riding him on the afternoon of July the 2nd. And Meade will be around, somewhere probably around the Pennsylvania Memorial, and a Confederate shot will explode, and the shell will land up. It hits Old Baldy in the side, in the stomach. Brushes over Meade's leg, doesn't seriously injure Meade, of course, but it lodges in Old Baldy's stomach. Meade thinks that Old Baldy is not going to survive his wound. He thinks it's going to be fatal for him, and Meade writes pretty tenderly about this horse. Of course, Old Baldy will survive. That's his 5th and final Civil War wound.
Wow.
Meade will keep Old Baldy with him until the Overland Campaign starts in the spring of 1864, and then he sends Old Baldy back to Philadelphia to sort of recover. But he's wounded here. And not to necessarily equate general's horses being wounded with how active a commanding general is, but I think there's some parallel. You can see Meade's out on the field. He's aggressive as a brigade commander. He's aggressive as a division commander. He's aggressive as a corps commander, and he's acting that same way here on July the 2nd. And I think, and maybe there's going to be some pushback on the stream or some confirmation, but I think Meade's active leadership helped reinforces Union victory here, and specifically on July the 2nd, the blunder that Sickles made with moving the 3rd Corps forward.
So, I was just thinking as you were talking, the 6th Corps, of course, arrives, Sedgwick's 6th Corps, and if you've explored the battlefield, there's 6th Corps monuments all over the place. Yeah. They're Little Round Top, they're on Culp's Hill, they're all here on Cemetery Ridge. Part of the reason they're all over the place is they are being deployed to take up spaces left by soldiers that have to move off to reinforce Sickles. Yeah. So people sometimes say, well, why didn't Meade use the 6th Corps as a big counterattack on July 3rd? They're scattered all over the place, partially because of this. Yeah. Partially because they're also deployed to kind of shore up Culp's Hill until Williams' guys get back, that sort of thing. They're moved all over the place because of this. Yeah. And actually, I hadn't really thought of that until you were saying this, and I'm like, that's part of the reason the 6th Corps is everywhere. And I wasn't really aware the 1st Corps guys came into this as well. Yeah. Yeah, so, you got all these corps involved, and as we were mentioning, and I'll give it back, there's sections of that line, the northern slope of Little Round Top, almost up to where the Father Corby Monument is, that's devoid of Union infantry until about 7 o'clock at night because Sickles has moved off. They don't get that finally filled in till that late in the day. Okay, so if you want to elaborate on that anymore, I'll give this back to you.
I'll just pick up on first what you said about the 1st Corps. And we get this notion, and it really stems from the pursuit, I think, that Meade is lethargic and he's not aggressive. And there are historians who promote that the victory here was more the responsibility of Meade's subordinates than Meade. And that's just, the evidence does not support that. Meade is everywhere on July the 2nd. And there's a famous encounter with him and John Newton, probably just north there of the Pennsylvania Monument. And you can imagine to your point, Dana, this area, because we're standing where Sickles would have been on July the 2nd, is absolutely devoid of federal soldiers. There is a gaping hole in this part of the line. And Meade is furiously looking for reinforcements. And then comes the 13th Vermont that's being led by John Newton to take a position here. The 13th Vermont, it's one of the largest regiments in the Union Army. And Meade is there on horseback, just vacant line until the 13th Vermont guys file in. And one of Meade's staffers writes about seeing Meade sort of silhouetted here on Cemetery Ridge. And I'd like to share the quote because I think it really says a lot about Meade's leadership. This is from Lieutenant Paul Oliver on Meade's staff, and he says, "I've always looked upon this act of pluck and daring on the part of General Meade as considerable importance at the time. It restored the courage and the morale of the troops. It helped to inspire the men with confidence." You see your commanding general on horseback leading reinforcements into this vacant part of the line, I think is critical. And I think it's a testament to Meade's leadership, particularly here on July the 2nd.
I've studied Gettysburg a lot, right? And you've laid this out in such a clear manner that I feel like I've learned a lot between the two stops we've had about the movement initially of Sickles and also Meade's role here. I'm going to put you on the spot just a little bit, okay? What is your favorite synthesis book about the Battle of Gettysburg? I'll tell you what mine is. It's Noah Andrew Trudeau's A Testing of Courage. I like that book. One of the reasons I like it is because he does portray Meade as a more active general. And one of the anecdotes that relates to July 3rd that I didn't know until I read that book is that we all know that Henry Hunt says stop firing as Pickett's men, save ammunition, right? At that time, Meade had gone to Powers Hill because his headquarters is getting shelled. But he had actually sent the same order to say stop firing, and it's kind of like the letters crossed in the mail because he's sending an order to Hunt. He had the same idea, save the ammunition for the attack. And the same as he's doing that, Hunt's orderly kind of rides into the headquarters saying Hunt's going to stop it. And that's Hunt gets all the credit, and understandably, Meade had the same idea. So what book would you recommend? That's the book I like.
Well, I would say, too, Meade starts his professional soldier career as an artillerist. So he serves in every branch of the U.S. Army except for the cavalry. So he's in infantry, he's in artillery, and he's in a topo. So he certainly has experience with how artillery works. That's what he's commissioned when he comes out of West Point. What was your question? Oh, book. I'm going to say Coddington. I don't know if maybe that's a predictable answer, but there's nothing that I've ever thought about with Gettysburg that I couldn't look in the index of Coddington's Gettysburg and find just a masterful description of.
When was that first published?
650. I'm sure someone on the chat on the 50s or 60s.
But it's republished, and maybe hasn't been. It's. There are other books that are good, but maybe Coddington really hasn't been surpassed, right?
I don't think so.
So if you would go to a desert island, you would take Coddington, right?
Yeah.
That's what we're saying. Okay. All right. Thanks. All right. So there's your view from Dr. Murray, Jennifer Murray, about what book she considers the best. We have some people who want to say hi. Anybody watching? Any questions or anything?
Yeah. Justin Yarosevich is watching.
Justin Yarosevich, hey, how you doing? Tom Dean, okay.
Mark Fleetwood.
Mark Fleetwood, my old coworker. How you doing, Mark?
Barry Nichols.
Hey, Barry.
Jim Katz.
Hey, Jim. How you doing, Jim Katz?
Smeltzer.
Harry Smeltzer. All right. Let's go Bucks.
Jeremy Brenneman is
Jeremy Brenneman, how you doing?
Chris Mary.
All right, Chris Mary, thank you.
Lots of people.
Fantastic. Thank you all for tuning in. We're going to go. Actually, I haven't mentioned, it's been really hazy here with the Canadian wildfire smoke. It's a little better today than it was yesterday, I think. And the sun is actually, it feels sunny. Yesterday it felt very overcast the whole day, but it's still really humid. But it's a little, so hopefully you get a sense of these vistas when we pan around because it's not quite so bad. So we're going to go from here to the Lydia Leister House, which was Meade's headquarters. And we're going to talk about the Council of War that was held after everything settled down, the line was stabilized, and we're going to talk about that controversial Council of War with Jennifer. So we're going to leave here and see you there very shortly. And until then, this is Data Shoaf and Jennifer Murray signing off from under this gorgeous, shade-giving tulip poplar tree on Cemetery Ridge. See you soon.